Hello everyone and welcome to the Constructive Criticism Network. This network is here to help you improve at Magic the Gathering at every level. From Pauper Leagues to Top 1000 Mythic, we've got you covered. If you want to hear the entire network, head on over to our sponsor at puremtgo.com, where you can hear each and every show, each and every week, and check out their sponsor, MTGO Traders, and tell them that the CCMTG Network sent you. Now sit back, enjoy the show. From YouTube, podcasts, and more, here's this week's episode from ConstructiveCriticism.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 114 of the Common Knowledge Podcast. I am your host, Christian, and I am joined by our co-host, Brad.
Hello, everybody.
Before we got too far into this episode, I just want to remind everyone that Common Knowledge and all of the podcasts on the Constructive Criticism Network are sponsored by puremtgo.com. If you would like to support the show, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Common Knowledge YouTube channel and check out our Patreon. With that out of the way, let's get on with the podcast for the week.
All right. How you doing, buddy?
Doing pretty well. It's been a pretty good week for me. What about yourself?
Pretty good. We got the Pauper Singleton tournament coming up tomorrow evening, so that should be a blast. I think right now we've got 9 or 10 players signed up. Hopefully get a few more, but we'll see how it goes. You know, sometimes we've had 10, sometimes we've had 17 or 18, so let's see.
Yeah,
are there competition out there with all these player-run events? I think there's generally about 1 to 2 different ones going on every night of the week nowadays.
Gotcha. Are there any deck or deck concepts you hope you see?
I hope I see a lot of Kaldheim. That's all I know. A lot of snow lands, snow duels. Obviously, pretty much every deck is a brew, so I can't really say I'd like to see brews, but yeah, just any of the new stuff. Maybe a couple of, well, we only got a couple, but some of the new vehicles we got from Kaldheim. I think that'd be pretty interesting to see in a singleton list. Any sort of artifacts, vehicles, tribal matters, sort of thing.
Gotcha. I'm pretty excited to digest the results of it.
Yeah, I think that's probably something we may end up talking about on the next episode, because we're going to run the whole event in one night as opposed to over the course of a week, so it should be a lot more streamlined.
Heck yeah, and by the time our viewers hear this, the event will have already passed then, which is, I don't know, it's pretty exciting, because that means that they only have a few days before we turn around and talk about it.
Yep, I like it. But yeah, that's pretty much how my week's going.
Yeah. I don't know, there's been a lot of change to the format recently in a very short period of time. Not like major changes, but people sort of brewing with new Kaldheim cards.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know that you and I were both sort of wanting to go about a deck that we both theorized could be making a comeback, as well as a lot of the Pauper community, which was...
Yeah, it was funny. I threw the link to this deck in the show notes yesterday morning, I think, and then I think just a few hours later, someone had posted it in the Discord, like, "Hey, I'm brewing this. I brought this back from the dead. I'm trying to brew it up. What do you think?" So I thought that was synchronicity or serendipity or whatever you want to call it. So I wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, and that deck for the viewers at home is Domain Zoo.
Domain Zoo. I pulled this list off ntgtop8.com from December 17th of 2016. So we're going back about 6 years. And it placed second in a MTGO Pauper League. So at the time, it was doing pretty well. Let's see if we can... I just want to kind of go over it a little bit, see if there's anything we think Kaldheim brings to the table. If a deck like this could be viable again for any reason or with any tweaks. But yeah, it basically runs off the domain mechanic, which is... I didn't know what this was for the longest time, so if any of the listeners don't know, that is not a big deal. But domain is you get an effect based off the number of basic land types among lands that you control.
Yeah, so if you don't mind, just tell our viewers at home sort of like what the general game plan is in a domain deck.
Pretty much, it's an aggro deck. It's a turn sideways tribal sort of deck, but you're trying to get your lands out, get as many different basic land types out on the battlefield as you can, as quickly as you can. There's a few different enchantments you can use to turn your lands into all land types, or other land types, including the one they start with, so that adds to your domain count. Then there's a couple way to burn out your opponent, go to face, that sort of thing. We can touch on those, but typically, mostly it's just just an aggro deck. You just want to drop lands and turn them sideways, turn the creature sideways.
Yep. So normally, I know that these decks, as well as the list that we're looking at here, normally plays like Curd Ape, which is a 1/1 for 1 red, but it gets +1/+2 as long as you control a forest.
Mm-hmm.
And Wild Nicodle, which is 1 green for a 1/1, but it gets +1/+1 as long as you control a mountain, and +1/+1 as long as you can control plains. So obviously these cards benefit a lot from having lands that have multiple basic land types. So the snow lands sort of fit in here perfect, I think.
Yeah, and that was pretty much what brought it up. As soon as those snow duels were spoiled, 3 or 4 weeks ago now, this was one of the first decks that people started talking about. Like, oh, is Zoo viable again? Can I play my domain deck again? And I mean, we'll see if it ever comes back to prominence or even some sort of competitiveness. But I think it's interesting. It's an interesting concept to revisit, for sure. But yeah, like you said, it's really the creature base is just all about value. You know, your Curd Apes are a 1-drop. They're essentially a 2/3 for 1 mana. Your Wild Nicodles are a 3/3 for 1 mana. And then this particular deck is run at a place that is Core Skyfishers, which come into play. You can bounce some enchantments that we'll talk probably about here in a second. And then the other creature runs 20 total creatures. Aura Gnarlid, it has a 4 of in there as well. It gets creatures with power less than Aura Gnarlid can't block it, and it gets +1/+1 for each aura on the battlefield. So that's an interesting choice. I think that's one of the ones that I would look at first to cut out of the deck. I don't know about you, but that's where my eyes were drawn.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Both Aura Gnarlid as well as the deck plays 4 Abundant Growth, 4 Nylea's Presence, 4 Rancor. And I think I still like Nylea's Presence because it actually makes your land all basic land types to further help with domain. But I actually don't like Abundant Growth because I don't want to spend 1 mana to play on like a land that came into the battlefield tap, because I think that's just like such a disadvantage on tempo that it would be hard to really call it an aggro deck anymore. So if I'm cutting the Abundant Growth, then I definitely want to cut the Aura Gnarlid. My second cut to go along with that is kind of Core Skyfisher, because as soon as you start cutting on the enchantments, then you probably also want to cut the thing that will primarily bounce the enchantments.
Right, and I think Abundant Growth, Skyfisher really is only beneficial in this deck with Abundant Growth, because Nylea's Presence. Oh, I guess Nylea's Presence does draw a card as well, so that's fine. Rancor is going to pretty much 90% of the time come back to your hand anyway. So you got 4 creatures in Skyfisher that work with only really 8 of your other cards. So yeah, I can see that one being cut as well.
Yeah, so I don't know, we sort of have, I guess, the cuts that we were talking about. Did you have any like cards that you thought could like just obviously fit in here from the current Pauper metagame?
I do. I don't know how much it's actually a meta player at the moment, but if we're getting rid of those Aura Gnarlids, I'd be willing to try out 4 of a Boreal Grazer. Something with a nice big butt, give it a little reach, and you're able to put another land into play as soon as it comes down. So that instantly ups your domain count, you know, assuming you've got them in hand. What do you think about the Grazer? I know it was killing standard for a while, but...
Yeah, so that's actually not one that I thought about, but I think I like it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that I thought about, because it seems like this is a deck that's going to have like a really big punch early, but I think there's a lot of stability going on like in the sort of like the mid game. Like Pauper has a lot of really good mid game decks, so I was also sort of wanting like maybe like 1 or 2 cards that could go over the top. And so I was thinking maybe like Entourage or Trest or something like that, just in case they are able to stabilize, you still have a chance.
Yep. Yeah, I think a deck like this could definitely, I mean, all decks can benefit from having the Monarchy, but yeah, for sure something like this I have no problem with. I don't think this is a deck that, talking about new meta cards, I don't think this is a deck that you'll want to put any sort of Cascade into necessarily.
I agree.
because there's just not a lot of value to cascade into, so I wouldn't be too concerned with it. I was actually looking at the land count. I understand it's an aggro deck, but does 20 feel right to you? I think I'd like to see something like 20 or 22 even. 21 or 22.
Yeah, so I actually agree, especially if we're going to sort of going on Arboreal Grazer and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think that
So I
that
was
makes it
thinking,
better.
a boreal grazer, even things like explore, draw a card, put a land into play. Just anything like that to catch you up or get your creatures those extra bonuses. Um, and we did not talk about the instants and sorceries, of which there are only 8 total, 4 lightning bolt and 4 tribal flames. Tribal flames is a 1 and a red for a sorcery. Tribal Flames deals X damage to target creature or player, where X is the number of basic land types among lands that you control. So at most, this is going to be 1 and a red, deal 5 to the face.
Yeah, so I don't know. I know I spoke about reach earlier. This is sort of how the deck already had some built-in reach. Is you get them to a low enough life total, then you draw Tribal Flames or 2, and you sort of just punk them out of the game.
Right. I mean, between the Tribal Flames and the Lightning Bolt, you've got 4, 5, over 30 points of damage, if I'm doing my math right, just off those 8 spells. So yeah, I like that a lot. I don't think we need to go over too much of the sideboard, because obviously it looks pretty stock, and it was sort of probably geared for the 2016 metagame. But it doesn't look there's nothing too crazy in there that you wouldn't see nowadays. Yeah, it was just something I wanted to talk about. The land base is pretty straightforward. 4 Evolving Wilds, 3 Terramorphic Expanse, 8 forests, 2 mountains, and then 1 of each island, swamp, and plains.
Yeah, obviously the mana base could be updated, and there are a few cards that I might cut and think really hard about the replacements. But overall, I think that this deck could make a pretty good comeback.
I think so too. Obviously, we got to worry about targeted removal in our current meta, but with the right creature, even with the Arboreal Grazer edition, there's not really going to be a creature that dies to Cannonade even in a list similar to this. You know what I mean? One creature we didn't talk about was the Matka Rioters. 2 and a green for a creature human warrior. It has domain. Its power and toughness are equal to the number of basic lands that you control. Basic land types among lands you control. So, what's this? A 3 CMC 5/5 at its best. 7/5 with a Rancor on it. I think that's okay.
Yeah, and I don't know. I would love to also maybe try and think of a way to get blue cards in here and black cards in here, if at all possible. Just because if we're going to be playing those basic land types, we might as well see if we can find a way in the sideboard or even in the main deck, take advantage of it. So that might be another thing that I look into. But Matka Rioters, again, the domain mechanic is just super powerful. And I think that card is a pretty good example. That plus Tribal Flames could probably carry you to some wins in the format currently.
Yeah, I agree. And I like the idea of using the new snow duels because they are the 2 basic land types. Like this deck here takes up an entire slot for an island and an entire slot for plains and an entire card for a swamp, where that could be 3 snow duels, and you'd have all that covered easily.
Yep.
While still having your main colors represented. If that makes sense.
It does. It makes a lot of sense to me.
But yeah, I just thought that was kind of neat how, I don't know, just looking back. I like to look back through decks, and this was one of the first ones that people started getting really excited about once we got the Kaldheim cards spoiled, so I thought it'd be interesting to take a look at. You're not a fan of these enchantments, are you? Well, you already said Abundant Growth you'd get rid of, probably.
Yeah, and, the deck also has Rancor. I would probably keep Rancor unless, I could find, another really good aggressive creature. So maybe, even if I played Thraben and Spectre, I would still play Rancor. I think it's probably a good enough card to warrant being in this deck.
Now does 4 Curd Ape and 4 Wild Nacatl, is that enough to run a play set of Burning Tree in your mind?
Yes. I think Burning Tree Emissary is a very, very good card. So much so that, even if you were to go, like, let's say that you went, blue-red tap duel on turn 1, and then turn 2 you played Forest, and you went Burning Tree Tribal Flames, it's like, I would be fine, dealing 3 to them and having a 2/2 in play.
Yeah, I didn't think about that synergy, but yeah. So I could see that. Drop the Aura Gnarlids for 4 Grazers, drop the Skyfishers for 4 Burning Tree, and then switch that land base around a little bit, update it quite a bit. I think we're humming.
Yep.
I like it. Yeah, Rancor, Nylea's Presence. I do like Nylea's Presence. I don't think we talked specifically about that one, or did we?
Yeah, I had mentioned briefly that I wanted to keep it around just because it makes one land, all basic land types, to just give you maximum domain as quickly as possible. But
yeah, absolutely. It costs 1 more than Abundant Growth, but it also draws you a card and turns that land, whatever land it's enchanting, it turns it into every basic land type, essentially.
So rules question: Waste is a basic land type, right?
Waste?
Waste.
I am not. No, I don't think so.
Hang on, I must look this up.
Yeah, I thought basic lands were straight up 5 basics. Because waste is a basic land, you can include it in many. Yeah, because you can have as many as you want in your deck, correct?
Yeah, but I just want to know, like, is it like a land type as well? So, like, for example, does Nylea's Presence? So I'm looking at the waste card, and it doesn't say basic land with like a dash waste. It just says basic land. So I'm assuming it's not a basic land type. Because I was going to go, man, did all these cards just get a lot better randomly? But
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I think because it doesn't have an actual type, then it's not a type. Yeah. It's a weird way to say it, but yeah.
Yeah, I'll go to bed sad tonight. It's okay.
Yeah, I like where your head's at, though.
Right.
But yeah, I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. We can move on from that, but I think I'd like to try it anyway. I never played Domain Zoo at any point in my life, but it seems like the kind of deck I'd have a blast with.
For sure. Maybe that'll be what we have on the what are we playing next week segment.
Yeah, and then there's also Horned Kavu. For red and a green, you get a 3/4. When it comes into play, you have to return a red or green creature you control to your hand. I wonder if that's a little too out there to fit in a strategy like this, because you could always bounce the Burning Tree, cast it again, that sort of thing. And it is a big, beefy dude.
Yeah, is that the it's 2 mana, right? Like a red and a green for a 3/4.
Yeah, it's a red and a green for a 3/4. When Horned Kavu comes into play, return a red or green creature you control to its owner's hand.
I would probably play this card. If we're just looking to get like insane creatures down with like insanely cheap creatures down with really good stat blocks, this one fits the bill. So I would try it.
That's what I'm thinking, and I think it's great. I think this mixed with Burning Tree Emissary is a real powerful play. Anything like that. If you've got any sort of red or green creature you want to bring back, I think it's awesome. So yeah, that is Domain Zoo. I think unless you had anything to add to it or brew anything more with it, I think we could move on.
Yeah, no, it's it looks like a fun deck to play. I would be interested in watching somebody make some innovations on this to see where it could go.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But I guess now we can sort of just get on to our main topic.
All right.
Which, we sort of wanted to start doing a thing where every now and again we take like a snapshot of the format where it's at and sort of go through like our top 10 artifacts, top 10 instants, top 10 enchantments. So this time we wanted to do the top 10 artifacts in Pauper on this day, January 31st, 2021.
Yeah, but the top 10 current artifacts.
Right.
I initially came up with a list that was about half artifacts that don't really ever see play. So I'm glad we sort of fine-tuned that criteria.
Oh yeah, whenever two brains come together, it is always more powerful than one brain.
Right. It's just hard to get mine wrangled in sometimes.
Yeah, but I guess as always, we will start at the bottom of the list and work our way up.
Yeah, I think so. Now, were you confident with these being in powerful order, or are they just...
I think the further towards the bottom you get, the less sure I was. But I would say that my top three are definitely in that order, and then my top five, I could see 4 and 5 switching. But I think all of those cards are better than the bottom half.
Okay, so it's basically we got 10 to 4, and then our top 3 is pretty much set.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you agree with that, but that was sort of my feelings.
No, I
on
do.
it.
There's a couple between 5 and 10 that I'd switch around, but it's just a matter of personal deck preference and all that sort of stuff. So,
yeah,
trying to go objectively with it.
Right. So our number 10 artifact currently in Pauper is none other than Bone Splitter.
Yep. It's probably, what would you say, it's the most powerful equipment we have at the moment?
I would say it's one of them, yeah.
One of them.
It's probably the best like generic equipment that does what equipment originally did, which is just make your creatures better.
Right,
for those,
really just put a weapon in their hand and make them stronger.
Right.
Yep.
For those that don't know what Bone Splitter does, it costs 1 generic mana, and then it costs 1 generic mana to equip, and equipped creature gets +2/+0. In our format, oftentimes you'll see like I believe like either fairies and mono blue, or at least you did a long time ago, saw them wearing it, and then every now and again you'll see like a Squadron Hawk wearing it.
Mm-hmm. That fairy, it's coming back. I saw a couple lists posted over the weekend, and that was sorry to harken back to the domain deck, but that was another thing that got me thinking about that. Is I saw some pretty good mono blue aggro decks posted this weekend on Twitter, some 4-1s and maybe a couple 5-0s, and they were running Bone Splitter, and I thought, man, I have not seen that card in forever, especially in a mono blue deck. So they kind of got me going down memory lane, and then I landed on the zoo deck, and here we are. But yeah, you're right. I think it's great in mono blue. It's great with any sort of flying weenie you have on the board. A lot of times you'll see this suited up on a Guardians of the Guild pact as well.
But yeah, overall I think Bone Splitter's just a pretty good card. And if that
I don't think it's anything you want to, you don't want to brew around a Bone Splitter, but if you've got room for it, by all means, I think it's a great card.
Yeah, and then this next card, I think will actually fall out of the favor in format even more than it already has soon. That's a Springleaf Drum. It's 1 generic, you tap it and an untapped creature you control, and you add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Oftentimes I liked this card in like multicolor aggro decks in Pauper, but the mana is starting to get so good in other places, and especially with new snow duels, I think a lot of people's go-to is actually going to be Arbor Elf for this.
Yeah, there's the Arbor Elf, and there's the new one from Kaldheim that untaps a snow land if you tap it.
Yeah, that I think even though this makes any of your creatures be able to produce mana, it won't be as a part of the ideal start as turn 1 Arbor Elf, turn 2 Snow Land, untap it with Arbor Elf, play a 2-drop. That I think this one's going to fall out of favor in the meta, and to be honest, it's already sort of fallen out of favor. So
it has, for the longest time, this was I'd call it a staple in Affinity, ATOG decks, but even those aren't running them very often anymore. A lot of them have evolved to go towards the Thraben Inspector Jeskai Affinity build. So yeah, it's a great card in what it does and everything. It just, you're right, it's just the popularity is dwindling, I think.
Yeah, especially there are other cards on this list that I think also contributed to it being pushed out.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, unless you're Affinity, you've only got a certain amount of wiggle room for artifacts.
Yep. And then number
So-
8 on our list. Do you want to take this one away?
Sure. Let me pull it up real quick so I don't mislead our listeners. Number 8 on this list is a Viridian Longbow. This is a elf specialty, I believe. You see it a lot in elves, any goblins, even any sort of go wide, small creature sort of strategy. It came out of, it's only ever been printed in Mirrodin, and for a generic mana, it's an artifact equipment. Equipped creature has tap. This creature deals 1 damage to target creature or player, and you equip it for 3 mana. Pretty straightforward. The equip cost is a little higher than what a lot of aggro decks can afford. I think that's why you see it more so in elves than anywhere else. But this also plays very nicely with Arbor Elf, and is it Arbor Elf? Not Arbor Elf. The elf that untaps other elves and does all the shenanigans.
Quirion Ranger? Is that
yes. Return a hand. Yeah, return a forest, untap an elf, tap it again, do 2 damage to something, or spread that damage out.
it? Mm-hmm.
You'll usually see this in sideboards as a 1, maybe 2 of. You'll never really see more than 2, and I don't think I've ever seen it in the main deck of anything. What about you?
Yeah, no, I think that this one's mostly like strictly a sideboard option for like elves and stuff like that, to get rid of those pesky fairies, or even sometimes in the mirror match, stuff like that.
Yep.
But it's powerful nonetheless. Still sees play in our format, and
and it has forever. It's very powerful. It seems rather innocuous until you actually get it on one of your creatures and you start pinging stuff away, and all of a sudden they have no creatures left. Yeah, it's pretty powerful.
yeah. But then, moving on, we have up next Spire Golem for the number 7 slot, which for the people at home is a 6 mana 2/4, but it has affinity for islands and flying. So I don't know about you, but oftentimes for me, this is like one of those cards that gets played for 2 mana often. They have 4 islands in play, and they play a flying 2/4, and you're just like, I don't know what to do. This thing doesn't die to lightning bolt.
Right, it doesn't die to lightning bolt. You can beef it up pretty quickly with any other spell, with a bone splitter even. But yeah, if you're paying more than 3, if you're actually tapping more than 3 lands to cast this thing, you're probably doing something wrong, or it's in the wrong deck. You want to have this in a deck where your islands are very, very high. You have a very high island count, which is another thing that Kaldheim is going to bring us. Now you can start playing 2 color mono blue strategies.
Oh, yeah.
You can have your mountain forests out there and your mountain islands out there, and it'll still count towards the affinity for Spire Golem.
Right, you can quite literally have your cake and eat it too.
Yep, and that's pretty awesome. I like both of those things.
Yeah, I do as well. Not much more to say about this one other than it's a really good tempo option. It blocks basically everything. It closes games super quickly, surprisingly quickly.
Yeah, for only having 2 power, that flying really lets it get in every single turn.
Yeah, especially, normally the way that those decks close are with 1 power creatures, so it literally doubles the clock. Like, come on, man.
It's like, come on, son. All right, number 6. Is that where we're at? Yep, moving up to number 6. May have cheated a little bit on this one because it's not a specific card rather than it is an entire set of cards, and that is the artifact lands. Let's see, the Great Furnace, Seat of the Synod, Tree of Tales, Vault of Whispers. I forgot the plains.
I don't know what the white one is. Oh, yep, Ancient Den.
There it is. Yep. These aren't going anywhere. These are going to be always very popular. For a long time, they were, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think for a long time they were only played in Affinity, and then Boros got a hold of them, other decks got a hold of them for the Galvanic Blasts, Metalcraft bonus and all that.
Yeah, that, and there's also one, I forget its name all the time, but it's indestructible and colorless.
Yeah, the Darksteel Citadel.
Yeah, it's like those 6 lands, you can play those in Boros with your Galvanic Blast, your Coldotha Rebirths, that sort of deal, and it's really good there. It's good in Affinity for obvious reasons.
For your ATOG, they're essentially a free mutagenic growth every time you put one into play, if you don't mind sacking it later to the ATOG.
Precisely.
Yeah, there's just so many things you can do. They count towards your thought casts, any sort of affinity spell you have. They count towards that because they are artifacts and lands. They're not basic land types, but they count as lands and artifacts, and they're pretty broken. There's a reason they're banned out of certain formats.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I asked if you had ever played in Modern when the artifact lands were legal. I don't know exactly when they got banned out, so I don't.
Me neither. I haven't played with them in any other format other than Pauper,
Yeah, same here.
but they're really cool. They're a lot of fun.
Yep, they're very powerful. They pretty much lead to all sorts of good, fair, and broken strategies all at the same time.
Yep.
So if that's your thing, go for it.
Yeah. And then this next card is one that I think is going to be a controversial pick from me and from you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just think it's just true. Number 5 is Vault Scourge. I'm going to go ahead and say it.
The Imp.
Yeah. For a Phyrexian black and 1 generic, you get a 1/1 flying lifelink. This basically only sees play in one deck, but that deck is a staple of the format, and this is one of the best cards in it.
Right. On its own, yeah, I think you said it right. On its own, this card is pretty lackluster, I feel like. But in the right deck, such as Stompy, it's an all-star. You get it down as early as turn 1, and then turn 2, you slap a Rancor or 2 on it, and you're just off to the races. I think if it didn't have flying or didn't have lifelink, it wouldn't be on anybody's list ever, really. But because it has both those things.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yep.
This is another card that would look great wearing a Bone Splitter, but
Yeah, absolutely. Bone Splitter would be perfect. But no, I love Vault Scourge. I love Incidental Life Gain. It's got flying, which is one of the better abilities in our format. So I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's not an overall. You don't really see like Affinity playing this card, or really any other deck besides Stompy. So I think it's a very niche card, but it's a very powerful one in what it does.
Yep, I definitely agree. And then after that,
That was number 5.
Yeah, number
Crack the top
4.
4. Yep. Number 4 is Relic of Progenitus. This is one of the. Well, it's in the top 4 for a reason, but it's also one of players' favorite artifacts. Generally a sideboard staple. I don't know about you, Christian, but usually when I'm building a sideboard, even if I end up taking it out later, I start with 2 of these in that 15. Because you just never know. For those not familiar, Relic of Progenitus is a single colorless for an artifact. You can tap it. Target player exiles a card from his or her graveyard. Or you can pay 1 and exile Relic of Progenitus and exile all cards from all graveyards, and you get to draw a card. There's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, it is. It hits probably one of the most important zones in all of Magic, the graveyard. You draw a card. It's colorless because it's an artifact, so it can be played anywhere.
Yep, and I've seen it happen where game 2 of a match, I sideboarded this in, and I dropped it on turn 1, and they scooped because they knew that they had no artifact removal in their deck, and they were a graveyard strategy. It's just that powerful. It's not like necessarily Nihil Spellbomb that just automatically exiles everything from a graveyard. This, you can constantly just pick off the cards one by one, one after another, until you're ready. Because maybe, that's an important secondary action on it. If you're also on some sort of graveyard strategy, you don't want to use that ability to exile Relic or Progenitus, because then your graveyard is gone as well.
Yep.
So I think that first ability makes it the most powerful.
I agree. It also makes it, to where there are a lot of decks in Pauper that play like one card in their deck that has like a lot of synergy with the graveyard, and everything else is incidental. But maybe they're the kind of deck that only want to play one card a turn, and it's like to get full value out of that. Now they have to play other spells, maybe not exactly in the spot that they want to, and it forces like some really interesting decisions. And even when they make those decisions, then you can just pop it.
Yeah, because that popping it like that, exiling it, is pretty much at instant speed. So whenever you feel threatened, whenever you feel like they're ready to go off, you could just pop it, and that's pretty much scoop. There's a few decks I think that this automatically hits very painfully, very powerfully. Things like Reanimator, Tordex, one of my favorite decks. I've seen the Cycling Combo, Cycling Storm, whatever you want to call it. I've seen that deck fall to a well-timed Relic, first, second turn Relic. It needs to come down quick against that deck. But yeah, there's a lot of decks that fall to something like this. So there's a reason it's typically on the top of everybody's list.
Yeah, I agree. Relic is like one of those cards that's really oppressive, but it's the good kind of oppressive, where everyone's happy it exists.
Right. It's good for the format. No one has ever said that it's busted or broken or needs a ban or anything of that nature. It just feels right at home in pretty much every deck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then moving on, number 3. This is also one that I think will be controversial to be ranked this high. That is the Chromatic Star, Chromatic Sphere sort of deal.
Okay. Yeah, we have Sphere on the list, but Star and Sphere, for all intents and purposes, they're pretty much the same. The wording's a little different, but yeah, we're more talking about the effect rather than the specific artifact, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. I think that even though these cards sort of are maybe falling out of favor again in the format in the same way that Springleaf Drum has, they're still very powerful. They still see a fair bit of play. Just, fixing your mana for a one-shot, drawing a card, and putting something into your graveyard is a very powerful effect. Being able to fix your mana in any way in Pauper is always superb.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you mentioned before, fixing our mana is getting a little easier. But, cards like Chromatic Sphere are very powerful still. Still see play in Affinity. You don't, unless you're working some sort of artifact-based combo, something or another, you don't really play them a lot. But I don't think Affinity will ever get rid of them necessarily, because they do fix the mana, which can be a problem for that deck specifically. If you're running a Disciple of the Vault package, they help towards that. They'll drain for 1. So they really work with a lot of other synergies. They're just as powerful, or they're only as powerful as the deck they're in, though. It's one of those weird ones, I think.
Yeah, in the same way Vault Scourge is only as powerful as the deck that it's in.
Right. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then sort of moving on from there, the number 2 slot is going to be another mana fixer. And this one is going to be Prophetic Prism.
Prophetic Prism. This one is probably the best mana rock we have in the format right now, I would think. Let's see, Prophetic Prism for 2 colorless. When Prophetic Prism enters the battlefield, you draw a card. And for 1 and tap, it adds 1 mana of any color. There are an endless amount of decks that run Prophetic Prism. For good reason. It cantrips. If you bounce it and play it again, that's just extra value. It helps fix your mana. Tron loves that. A lot of slower, mid-range / control decks love it because it helps them fix the mana earlier. Where else do you normally see something like this?
Yeah, so you see it in those mid-range decks a lot. Like you said, that can bounce it. Used to see it in the Tron decks a lot. I don't know about you. I don't have much experience brewing, but back in the day, if I would ever brew a 3 or 4 color deck, Prophetic Prism was like easy auto include. Because it's like it advances your game plan because it draws a card. Most brews tend to be slower because they're brews.
The brews, they're usually trying to jam things together that don't necessarily belong together.
Right, and so it's like fixing your mana. You actually have the time to play it because your deck's a little bit slower. It draws you a card to hopefully get you to your good cards. It just does everything.
It's really probably the perfect, at least for Pauper, printed at common. Anyway, it's probably the best rock available to us.
Yeah.
It's not as cheap and fast as, say, a Chromatic Sphere or Star, but you don't have to sacrifice Prophetic Prism to get the value off of it. It just comes into play, and it cantrips. So it works with Flicker strategies, with Skyfisher strategies, anything like that. So.
Mm-hmm. And I think that this opinion is somewhere where you and I only slightly disagree. Because I'll go ahead and reveal our number 1 card, because I'm sure people have guessed it by now. And that was Bonder's Ornament.
Bonder's freaking Ornament.
Yeah, I tend to think that it's a slightly better mana rock. I don't think it's better by much than Prophetic Prism. But the fact that, it goes from mana rock to unbeatable card advantage engine is like, it's insane to me. Now, the one thing that I do think that Prophetic Prism has is that it's cheaper. And that you get the card immediately. Whereas, I almost don't really view Bonder's Ornament as a mana rock too much because it just costs 3 mana. Oftentimes, you're playing it to get that, subtle ramp, to go from 3 to 5, be able to double spell more quickly. And then later in the game, try and drown your opponent in card advantage.
Yeah. I'm glad you actually mentioned that because I'm not ashamed to admit that I completely forgot that you can tap this for mana. I'm used to seeing it just as such a card advantage engine where if it hits the battlefield, that you've got to react. You've got to do something in the next couple turns or you're just going to be buried.
Yeah.
I rarely see anybody tap it for mana, as a matter of fact. It's not something I ever think about. I think of it strictly as just a card draw artifact. But yeah.
I saw a tweet recently that said I'm old enough to remember when the best removal for Geist of Saint Draft was playing your own. And I sort of feel like I can sort of say the opposite, that I'm young enough to know that the best way to beat Bonder's Ornament is to just play them.
Just to play your own. Yep. Absolutely. So if you don't know by now, Bonder's Ornament came out in Commander 2020, one of the pre-constructed decks, I believe, decks, something like that. I don't follow those too closely. But for 3 generic mana, you get an artifact that you can tap it and add 1 mana of any color. Or, the most powerful part of it is you can spend 4 mana, tap it, and each player who controls a permanent named Bonder's Ornament draws a card.
Yeah.
So this is all about how fast you can get your own on board, and potentially how quick can you remove your opponents.
Yeah, it's I have pointed a lot of artifact removal at this guy.
Oh yeah. Yep. Because you're gonna see it if it's any sort of, the new Jund list plays it, the new Sultai list plays it, Tron plays it. So any sort of deck that plans on going past turns 6, 7, 8, anything of that nature is gonna have probably 3 of these in there. So you're gonna see it. These aren't a sideboard option. These are main deck. Coming at you game 1 sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll bury you pretty quick.
Yep. I don't know. Basically, Bonder's Ornament, you play it, like you said, if your deck goes long, then especially, Tron takes really good advantage because it's what's 4 mana to Tron,
Right.
But,
right. 2 lands, whoop-de-doo. Yep.
Exactly. But...
No, I think that deserves, especially in today's metagame, I think Bonder's Ornament deserves the number 1 spot, right above Prism. So I'm totally fine with that. I just literally forgot that it taps for mana. To me, it's just a artifact that draws you a card.
Yeah.
Constantly, every freaking turn.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. But yeah, so that was our top 10 list. Like I said, that's our top 10 artifact list on 1/31/2021. I'm excited for 1/31 or 1/30 or whenever 2022, when we can go back, we can look at this list and we can go, man, how dumb were we? Don't we know that like Megatron was gonna come out in 2 months?
Super Ultra Megatron,
Exactly.
Animatron. Yeah. Oh yeah, it's coming. I can feel it coming.
Yeah.
The fire design, baby. Power creep.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're also gonna do these for whatever card type we kind of feel necessary. Top 10 creatures, top 10 instants, top 10 sorceries, that sort of thing. I don't know how much further we'll break it down than that. We haven't really talked about doing a top 10 warriors creature type or anything like that, but just the broad strokes on each major 6 or 7 different types of cards, top 10 enchantments, that sort of thing.
So
But I always like doing them.
before we do like top 10 creature types, we're gonna do top 5 tribal enchantments.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. But I guess now we can go ahead and start closing the show with this week's Q&A if you want.
Yeah, we got 3 questions. A couple of them are from a few weeks ago that we hadn't got to yet, and then a couple of them are from yesterday, I believe. So I'll take the first one if you don't mind, Christian.
Yeah, go for it.
It's from our buddy on Twitter, OwlX, and he asks a couple questions. Have either of you tried any Pauper formats other than Classic Pauper, such as Standard, Pauper, Pioneer, Historic Pauper, or even PDH, Pauper Highlander? If so, which are your favorites and why?
I'll go ahead and answer for myself. I've brewed some, Singleton Pauper, of course, and I've played a lot of PDH. Well, not a lot. I've played a moderate amount. I tend to just stick to normal Classic Pauper because those are normally the games that I can find. It's really easy to play it online. Always can fire up Moto, and in paper when I have played Pauper, people around me just like Classic 4 of every card Pauper.
Yep, I'm pretty much the same way. I have, except for the PDH, I have yet to actually play a game of it, even though I've brewed 3 or 4 decks. I have a stack probably 1.5 inches thick of uncommon creatures that I want to brew around as my commander for those decks. I just haven't got to it yet. As far as the Standard, Pioneer, and Historic Pauper, I've seen quite a few people online that are passionate about those formats. They do well in those formats. They're always posting up lists or talking about them, and it seems really fun version of Pauper. I can't get over the hurdle of Arena and its economy, if that's the right word, in order to get all the cards I need to play those formats. And they're not necessarily supported formats. It's more of a, I guess you direct challenge people on Arena. I'm not sure how that works, but I know you can't just get on Arena and play Pauper. You can't play Standard Pauper. It's more, it has to be a designed event or I guess a direct challenge. I'm not sure how that works, actually.
Yeah, I think sometimes they do like 2 or 3 day events, but for the most part, it's just direct challenge, or maybe people fire up Spell Table. I don't know. I only very recently learned about like the Pioneer Pauper scene and stuff like that, so I'm no expert
I know
there.
Standard and Historic Pauper are pretty entertaining, pretty powerful for what I've seen, and popular. So I think that our answers to the first question just answered the second question. If so, which are your favorites? I would have to say, because of familiarity and just what's available, I like the eternalness of Pauper, so I would have to say that PDH is probably my favorite outside of traditional Pauper.
Okay. I guess I'll go ahead and take on the second question, which comes from Big B himself. Hi, Big B.
All right. Hi, Big B.
He wants to know what our thoughts on the PTQ were, what our favorite deck from the PTQ was, and what do we like more, cheeseburgers or tacos?
I really think he buried the lead here. I think that last question is the most important one.
Yeah, you know what? You're right. Big B, I have a really diverse answer to cheeseburgers or tacos. I think at their height, tacos will always be better than cheeseburgers. But cheeseburgers have such a high floor that I'm always rocking with them. That like if you were to go, Christian, do you want a cheeseburger or taco? And I said from where, and you said I'll only tell you after you pick, I would pick the cheeseburger.
Yep, absolutely. I think that's a great way to look at it. Cheeseburgers have a high floor, super high ceiling, where tacos have probably just as high of a ceiling, but their floor is pretty low. I've had some pretty terrible tacos that stuck around for days.
Yeah, and like, you know,
I
I'm
don't really
not
get that up.
knocking any friends in particular, but you know, I've had a friend go, "Hey man, I'm making tacos, come over." And you know, I go over and it's just ground beef, no sauce, and a tortilla shell and shredded cheese.
Yeah.
Like, hey man, this isn't really a
here's
taco.
shell.
Right.
Here's a floppy shell and some greasy meat. We're having tacos.
Yep.
I will say that I probably lean towards the cheeseburgers more so because there are, I can't think of the name of the one place. I always get it wrong anyway. But there's one place in Kansas City and one place in Iowa that their burgers are so delicious that they're worth the road trip. Like, I want to go up there just for the burgers and then drive home. I can't say that I've ever experienced that euphoria with tacos.
Yeah, no, it sounds like post-COVID, I'll make a flight to Iowa. I'll meet you there.
Yes, it's Meet Me at Jethro's. That's the name of the place.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and then I guess we could just tag team the last question. It comes from Mr. Miguel, if you want to read it.
Sure. Do you believe that we can see more 3 or 4 color decks than before, or the new snow duels will just allow for a better splash?
It's funny, you and I actually talked about this before the show.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we will see more 3 or 4 color decks, and I think it has nothing to do with snow duels.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly what we talked about. You mentioned how, I forgot exactly what you said, but in the pre-show you said how our mana base has gotten better, or Pauper's mana has gotten better, essentially. And I don't really know, and my question for you off that was I don't really know what caused that to happen, because we've had the Thriving Lands for almost a year now, and nothing ever came of it. I don't know if it's Commander Legends' fault. We didn't get any new lands out of that, though. I don't think you can blame Cascade on having a better mana base. But if you look at the leagues now, there are multiple 3-color lists hitting 5-0s.
Right. You know, it might just be like state of the meta, you know, where it's like, well, Cascade hates on Tron, and Tron was what was pushing out the other value-oriented decks, but it's like,
right.
Now that Tron has seen a slight downtick, like there are different types of value-oriented decks that can play more, and then, so it's like, you know, the mana got a lot better in Pauper, but because Tron was at the top, it was hard for those decks to take advantage, but now that Tron has sort of, is meeting its maker right now with the land destruction decks, you know, now other decks can take advantage of the great mana. And then, you know, obviously Snow Duels will help some. Like, you know, if you're playing a blue-black deck, maybe now you can, you know, splash white to play like an Esper Familiars deck. Or, you know, if you're playing a blue-red deck, maybe now you can splash black or white again. I don't know, I really want a deck to splash white and have a white control deck and Pauper. I'm sorry, I've been thinking about it for a while.
That's okay, I'm with you. I've been trying to make that work for many months now. So I think ultimately, to answer the question, there will be more 3-color decks. I'm not sure about 4 yet without having some sort of shenanigans, but definitely more 3-color decks than before. But I don't think, like Christian said, I don't know if that's related to the Snow Duels or not. I see the Snow Duel lands being more of a splash color.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Right, or the Snow Duels enable other shenanigans, like Domain.
Right.
You know, more decks could play stuff like Skred or Into the North.
Right.
Stuff like that.
Yep, Skred's probably going to see more play. I like the idea of taking a mono black list, for example, mono black control, and splashing the Ice Tunnel, which is the blue-black Snow Duel. Splashing those to leave up Counterspell, but maintaining your swamp count for whatever you need it for your corrupt spells or what have you. Just like I saw on Twitter, Stompy at _Stompy. He plays a lot of Blue-Black Delver. He's a Blue-Black Delver pro. He's been testing out Ice Tunnel in that list quite a bit, and I think he loves it. He replaced the Gain lands with it, the Dismal Backwater or whatever, with Ice Tunnel, and I think it's a good addition because the Ice Tunnel, Snuff Out sees Ice Tunnel as a swamp, so it counts as a swamp, that sort of thing. But yeah, that was just sort of a long and winding route to say that I think the Snow Duels will be better as a splash, but I don't think the 3 and 4 color decks are going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Maybe now, like, I don't know if they were playing it before, but those, like, Jund brews that you've been playing around with and that I've been seeing a lot on Twitter, maybe now those can play stuff like Snuff Out and still play the tap lands, you know? Just to have...
exactly. Yeah, I think that's where the Snow Duels are really going to shine. I don't think they're going to take the place of the Thriving Lands, but they'll probably play alongside of them pretty nicely.
Yeah. But anyways, Miguel, I hope we answered your question, but I believe that is going to do it for this episode of Common Knowledge. If you guys want to get in touch with us, you can find me on Twitter at JustGuyDad. Brad, where can they find you?
At Pauper _B on Twitter or BradDrackV on MTGO.
Yeah. Or you guys can always shoot us an email over at commonknowledgemtg@gmail.com. If you guys have any questions on the Pauper format, MTGO, or anything in life, you can either email us at the aforementioned email, send us a DM on Twitter, or leave a comment down below. Thanks again to our sponsor, PureMTGO.com, as well as the Constructive Criticism Network for letting us be a part of it. And last, but certainly not least, thank you for listening. Take very good care of each other.
And never stop brewing.